Welcome to After the Game. I'm Ray Doherty. This is a special Old Mate Sports presentation where we catch up with retired athletes and talk about some of the highlights of their careers, but equally as importantly, we find out what they've been up to since retiring. Some have been involved in special events, projects, politics, and some have even contributed back to their sport. So sit back and relax for the next 30 minutes or so as we delve into the careers and lives of retired athletes. They say any journey begins with the first step, and that's never been truer in sport. Players going from one level to another, stepping stones as they progress up the mountain of success to get to the top of their game and to reach their goals. That's certainly true of our first guest, who, like many other athletes before him, had his fair share of climbing that ladder to professional football. Mepi Faoagali grew up in Brisbane, played junior rugby for Norths and went to Wavell High, before joining the Queensland Police Service, representing Queensland country while based in Cairns. Mepi then returned to Brisbane Premier Grade for GPS before being selected to play in the Australian Sevens squad. But here's where it gets interesting. Not long after, Mepi was recruited to play for Taranaki in the NBC, before debuting for the Hurricanes in 1998, scoring a try on debut against the Waratahs. Mepi was then selected to play for Manu Samoa, playing 2 tests, before returning to Brisbane in 2003 to link up with his old club Norths. To talk about his rugby career, but equally as important to find out what Mepi has been doing in the years since retiring from professional rugby, I'm pleased to say that Mepi Faoagali joins me on the line. G'day, Mepi.
G'day, Ray.
How are you?
I'm very, very well.
That's good.
Great introduction, by the way.
Thank you, mate. I tried very hard. When looking back on your rugby career, what word comes to mind in describing what you've achieved? Satisfied?
Yes, I would have to say satisfied. I never considered myself overly talented. There were way more talented players that I came across. But one thing that I took pride in, I guess, is that I trained the hardest. I like training. If you didn't like training, you wouldn't be a successful rugby player at all. So definitely, yeah, satisfied. More and so the application, more and so the effort. Then, I played with some really super talented guys, but what I like to look back is think that I actually probably worked a little bit harder than most of the guys that I came across.
That's often a saying in sport that where some people lack talent, they make up for in work ethic. And over time, that work ethic can really shine through and deliver the same or similar results to people who have that natural talent.
Yes. Sport is a great metaphor of life, and you learn so many lessons on the sports field. And also, one of the things you learn is a training discipline. Talent will only get you so far. That's a truism. And really it is the work that you do. Yeah, there's a lot of discipline to becoming a successful sports person, both on the field, both off the field. Every element of your life, you need some sort of discipline to apply. So, when you're finished, or when I've taken a lot of lessons and a lot of the disciplines that took me to my, rugby experience, I equally use them in my everyday life. So I really encourage people to participate in sport. It is a great metaphor of life, and you learn so much about life, about yourself, about everyone around you. So yeah, I think definitely the lessons that you learn on the sports field are completely transferable to everyday life.
Tell me what it was like as a young man. 1 minute you pick for Queensland country, next minute you're travelling the world playing sevens for Australia.
Yes, it was very surreal, and things could change very quickly. I remember when I got called into the Blues in 98, my coach at the time, Colin Cooper, I was in Taranaki, and he called me up and he said, Graham Henry's going to ring you and you've got to fly to Auckland to join the Blues for the rest of the season. One of their players, I think it was one of their players was out injured. So that call in itself was pretty surreal. And then 10 minutes later, my phone rang and Graham Henry, and he's had a quick conversation. He said, listen, we're going to fly you up. You're going to catch a plane. He said, come to Eden Park because that's where we'll be, and you can meet the team and go from there. And so I remember getting this call in the afternoon, and I was buzzing. I was pretty excited. I was going to go. So I remember I flew up to Auckland from Taranaki. I got picked up by the manager at the airport and had all my bags. He said, "Listen, we're going to Eden Park. The team's just they used to train early in the morning. 7:00 was when they used to train, and they used to be all done and dusted by about midday. And so I think I got to Eden Park at around 10 a.m. and the team, I remember I was walking through Eden Park. I'd only been there once. Magnificent stadium, all through the network, going underground, all the tunnels, and there's the players' change room, and I kind of like walked to the doorway, and both the doors were open, and the whole team was sitting there. And this is when Sean Fitzpatrick was playing. There was Jonah Lomu, there was Carlos Spencer. They had just won I think they'd won the last 2 years, and Graham Henry was standing there, and he looked at me. He'd been talking. I must have interrupted him, and he stopped talking, and he looked at me, and he said, "Oh, can I help you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Mepi Faoagali. We spoke yesterday." And he was like, "Oh, sorry." And he had a mental blank at that moment, and it was a very humorous way to get introduced to the team, because some of the players knew who I was, but he came up and apologised afterwards. But look, it's sort of surreal when you're playing with guys who are that talented and that experienced. Even just training with them, you're playing a scratch game of touch. These are the guys that you've seen on TV, seen them play. You were their fans, and suddenly now you're kind of part of the group. It is a surreal experience.
That would have been something. I mean, to be honest, you probably were feeling nervous enough as it is walking up to those doors.
I know. Well,
you may as well said, "I've got a pizza here for Graham."
Yeah. The side note to that was I was one of the first players that was drafted into the Blues that was not from the area. They had such a strong pool of players, so I didn't have a place to stay, and so they had to give us some emergency accommodation, and they put it out to the players, and of all the people, Jonah put his hand up, and so I lived with Jonah for about 4 months, him and his wife. I stayed with him. We used to drive around. He drove me to training in the mornings, and this was '98, so he was fairly well known then.
Certainly at the top of his game by then.
He was. I was glad he was on my side, put it that way. whenever we were playing, but just living within that whole situation, it's surreal.
When you look at the players that you've shared the field with in your sports career, and we'll get to some of them in a minute, but just to sidetrack real quickly on Jonah Lomu, as we know that unfortunately, 2 former teammates of yours has unfortunately passed away. Jonah being one of them, the other one being Jerry Collins. But what was Jonah like to live with, just briefly, in that time as a younger, impressionable man, and you've got this guy, the best winger in the world, the most feared winger in the world.
Yeah.
What was he like to live with for you?
He was okay. He was a big kid. He had a big house. He was married. He had his South African wife at that time, and he was kind of almost, I was a couple of years older than him, and we got on really well. He was a big kid. He had a lot of cars. He had a lot of people. He had a manager. He had lots of people around him. On the field, we got on great. He was genuinely a really nice guy. He was great to play with. Good. He was definitely a big kid kind of guy. He loved his toys. Thankfully, back then, there wasn't much computer gaming going on. It was just maybe starting, so he wasn't kind of into that space, but loved his music.
Well, professional rugby also wasn't that old then too, because rugby didn't become professional until 1996.
Yes.
So it was all very new to everybody. What going to get paid to play? To do something we do for free?
That was one of the catalysts when I was in the mid-90s, and rugby became professional, and I saw a lot of guys playing professionally that I'd actually played with and grew up in New Zealand. I was actually born in New Zealand and played a bit of rugby in Christchurch. And Mark Hammett, he was in my year at school, and so there were guys that I had played with and that I knew that were playing the Super Rugby. And so this is when I was a policeman at Cairns, and I thought, if they can do it, I sure as hell can do it. And so that was really the start of my professional goal. When it became professional, and I knew you could make a living out of it. definitely was a catalyst to go for that goal.
Do you think your rugby career was, well, let me rephrase the question. Do you think your rugby career could have been more of what you wanted if you had stayed in New Zealand rather than coming to Australia?
Yes. Oh, look, yes and no. It would have been different. Better, hard to say, better or worse. I think it would have been different. I played a lot of age group rugby in Christchurch. Played at the old Lancaster Park. Played for Christchurch. Played for Canterbury and through the age groups. But in saying that, I also didn't get my first contract till I was 24, 25. And I managed to live a life. My years as a police officer gave me a great grounding to handle the pressures of being a professional athlete.
Well, that leads into my next question, actually. Yes. I mean, I know how a lot of younger guys, because as you know, we've both done extensive amounts of coaching in football and different types of football.
Yep.
And you tend to get a feel because you've been there yourself. I mean, I remember what it was like when I made my Premier Rugby debut, and I was sort of mortified and terrified and excited all at the same time.
Yep.
But I mean, for you, by this stage, you've had exposure at the NPC level. You've spent some time with the Blues. You've played sevens for Australia. Yep. You're sitting on the bench for the Hurricanes. You're playing the Waratahs in Sydney in 1998, and you get the call that says, "Hey, Mepi, you're up."
Yeah.
So for you, is it a big nervous moment? Is it pressure, or is it just another go out there and play some more rugby?
Well, I think by that stage, you've managed to handle your craft. You need to have nerves. You need to be nervous. It's a good sign. It's more, I remember that game. I remember that try, actually. It was a chip kick. One of the Bishop, I think Graham Bishop was playing 5'8".
Yeah, I was going to say you scored on debut as well. You beat me. But go on, that try, because you told me a funny story about that before. So go on, please. Tell us about that try.
It did happen, yes. I think I came on a reserve, made a break. We made the way downfield. Graham Bishop, I called for a chip kick to land underneath the post. Kicked it through. I was in a race for it with Dougie Howlett, who was New Zealand's fastest winger at the time, and I managed to beat him to the ball and scored under the post. The years after, I used to give Dougie a lot of grief about how I beat him to the ball and how he was supposed to be one of the fastest wingers in New Zealand.
I mean, you talked about before about some of the players you played with, but I mean, if you sat back and look at the list, it's a who's who of the All Blacks alumni, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Tana Umaga, Jerry Collins, Jonah Lomu, Christian Cullen, Fitzpatrick. I mean, it is an absolute who's who of All Black alumni and guys that are now in the history books as being some of the biggest contributors to New Zealand rugby history. What was that like for you?
Look, at the time, you just soak it all in, and you get to actually know these guys, the people behind them. And I mean, on the field, it was like poetry, really. You were nervous so long as you did your job. That was the key. Do your job.
Do your job. The famous Tom Brady line. Do your job.
Do your job, because these guys are so good at their job. If you just give them, like, without a doubt, the goal was to give the ball to Jonah in space. And so 14 guys.
That's like when I played junior football. We had this kid called Egan Wiki, and Egan was this big try scorer back, and everyone just said, just give the ball to Egan, just give it to him. So it was like that, was it? Just give it to Jonah.
Give it to Jonah, yes. It was, and so, in space. He needed it in space, and not all the time. So, look, it was.
No, a lot of the time he ran over people too, Mepi.
A lot of the time, yeah. I've seen, we used to, when he would score, we played a lot of kind of trial games together and a lot of scratch games. And every time he would score, I would say, "Did you see how I drew the defence? I gave you that space." The amount of players.
You're just telling me you set him up all the time.
Yeah, if there's a 2-on-1 with me and Jonah, the amount of players you'd get taken out. No one would ever want to drift off me and take Jonah. You'd get ready to be tackled once you pass the ball.
Well, it helped and hurt you at the same time. So
yes.
But so after a few years with the Hurricanes and Taranaki, you decided to come back to Brisbane and played for our old club, which is where we met at North.
At North, yes.
I was in the admin and coaching side of things, and you were still playing Premier grade, and flashing yourself about in terms of scoring tries. And I want to tell the funny story about when we first met, the very first time we met. Okay, so, and because you'd forgotten, and we were just talking about this a little bit before off air, and because I did tell you once before, but certainly what it was, I'd come back to the club and I was working with the committee, and I was working in admin and football operations of the day. And I remember I was on the sideline, and I think I was running water for Premier Grade at the time. And I think I said to you, I said something like, "Go Mep, or do you want to drink Mep?" And you looked at me and you said, and you deny this, but I tell you, swear on my youngest daughter's head that it was true. You said, "I'm going to get the ball, I'm going to chip it over that bloke's head, then I'm going to regather it and I'm going to score." And you were on your own 20 at the time. And the next play, they kicked the ball, you got it, and what did you do? You ran up, you chipped it, you regathered, and you ran it, and you scored. And I thought to myself, what a cocky bastard.
Sounds like me. At that stage, I remember fondly my time at Norths, because I'd given up playing professionally, and now I just wanted to play for the love of the game, to be honest. Rugby is a great currency. It gave me access. I went around the world playing rugby. I would meet people I'd never met before, and if we had a footy and a field, we could
That's all you needed.
Communicate. Yeah, we had a good time. And you can tell a lot about a person by the way they play rugby. If they get smashed, do they get up and pat the guy on the back that hit them? If there's an intercept and there's a runaway try, who chases, although they've got no hope of getting him? It's a real good way to not only to express yourself, but also to gauge, I guess, other people. And so, rugby was more. It was more than just a game for me at that point in time. And the reason I came to Norths was that it was the most geographically closest club to where I was living. I used to get on my bike, and Norths, I only chose Norths. So if it had been another end of the street, I was closer to Brothers, because I was living at Clayfield. So Norths won by about 300 meters. And, that period I thoroughly enjoyed. I think I played at Norths in that Premier for about maybe 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, well, that was my next question is what year did you finally give it away? Because I'm pretty sure it was around 2008, wasn't it?
Well, I slowly, I discovered the Friday night competition. I was working, and so the weekends were getting a little bit full with family life and work life. And so I just migrated I used to play, I think it's the Normandy Cup and the Wyatt Cup.
That's right, the fabulous Friday night competition.
The Friday night competition, legends, where legends go.
So, Mepi, when did you give it away, and what helped you to decide to give it away?
Okay, I ended my playing days in 2000s. It would have been late 2000s. I was getting older, and there were a lot of young guys coming through. I remember my love for rugby has never diminished, but I was asking questions that my body couldn't deliver. And so I can remember a couple of games being stood up and run around, and they were the signs that I couldn't contribute the way that I wanted to contribute. And so
I think the saying is your body was right. You were writing checks your body couldn't cash. I believe that's the saying.
That was most definitely happening. There was nothing to give, and so I kind of, as I said, I still love rugby. I did love the game, and I wanted to stay involved. So I started playing Friday night comp. I still run around Golden Oldies. If there's an odd game, I probably play the 1 or 2 games a year.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a strong rugby community network that I stay in touch with. I have a scratch touch game once a week. One way that I looked back, one way that I could stay involved was to do coaching. As I kind of knew that my playing days were coming to an end, I really looked at ways that I could get involved in the coaching arena.
So in 2004, you became an accredited track and field coach.
Yes. Well, I looked at, I was lucky enough. I was part of the Little Athletics program of New Zealand. I was taught how to run. Running is a learned skill. And I used to go to Little Athletics, and there was a coach, and I got some good skills and knowledge that actually helped me be a better rugby player. I wasn't a fast runner by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, you were much faster than me, I can promise you that.
I was naturally, but after lots of training, and it always resonated with me that, there is a little bit of coaching goes a long way. And so when I looked at the coaching options that were available, and I'd always trained with track athletes, they seem to, a lot of, if there's a new way to do something, they're kind of on the edge. And I learned a lot of training techniques from track athletes. So I'd always had an affiliation with the track community, and there were not a lot of track coaches in the rugby scene. And so I'd looked at being a team coach, a backs coach, or a head coach, and it just didn't appeal to me. It seemed like too much. You weren't coaching in the end. You were just kind of managing. And so I decided to get a bit of a niche qualification, and I did my level 1 coaching and under Athletics Australia, and I started that. And so I became a track and field coach, and I was lucky enough to work with some really good track coaches in Brisbane. There was a hurdles squad, a sprint squad. They had a head coach, and I got some great insights to track and field coaching through that environment, and I was able to bring it across to help rugby players who wanted to run faster, jump further, throw further.
So that leads to 2009, when you had an invention. You had a
Yes.
a moment of an epiphany of something that can help you deliver better performance, like whether you're as an athlete, and you created, for lack of a better term, the Pellas training aid and systems. So tell me about that.
Yes, well, the Pellas were born. I call them a device. They're a training device. They're a tool, like any tool. If you use correctly, they can give you benefits. So I was really, and it was around late 2000s, 2007, 2008. I was with some coaches, and we were brainstorming ways. How do you get the same result with less effort and less resources? And so, we came up with some ideas about what devices you could invent. I mean, in terms of track and field, they've got hurdles, they've got sleds. It hasn't advanced. There's not a lot of equipment when it comes to track and field. And so there's some scope for improvement. And one of the ideas that we discussed was wearing a weighted sleeve. And that weighted sleeve would actually be able to use in a functional environment. So I was lucky enough we had a biomechanist on our team. We had physios, we had some sports scientists, and we did some testing. We tested out a device, and in 2009 we launched we released the device. It's a weighted sleeve where the weight is actually positioned along your forearm. And what happens when that weight is positioned there is that all your abdominal muscles, your transverse abdominis, rectus abdominis, are all forced to work harder in isolation. And so the device is designed, you put it on, and you basically do your functional exercise. It's a very, and the other key component is not only where the weight is placed, but how much weight. So one of the secrets to why Pellas are so good is that it's relative to body weight, it's light. So the lightest are 200 grams, and the heaviest is 750 grams. When we think about our arms, the average adult arm, weighs around about 5 kilos.
Really?
And so relative to that weight, it's significant. It's 750 grams, isn't it? It's over 10% of that weight. But
that's right, about 11%. Yeah.
So where we put the weight is, and how much we put it, it makes a huge difference.
And you developed, and through this, you also developed a whole, not only exercise regime for high performance athletes, but you also created it for everyday people. I mean, I remember, if you remember back then, I was recovering from a very serious and long-term back problem, and you, which resulted in me putting on a ton of weight, and you gave me some Pellas. I remember that, and I had problems with my back, and it actually helped me enormously with the Pellas, and you gave me a set, and it helped me enormously. And I remember that very carefully, very clearly, because it just makes you feel, it just gives you power. In a strange way, you have a bit more stability as well.
Yeah, well, what's actually happening biomechanically, you're turning on muscles that you otherwise don't turn on. But as soon as you put them on, you're actually activating a set of stabilizer muscles. And then what happens is when you take them off, you train them to be activated. And so physios use them. They're such a versatile tool. You can use elite athletes right through to incapacitated. If you're a lot of seniors, my mum, she was 70. She used to go walking in her palace. She loved to walk, and she found these supremely comfortable and appropriate for her when she went on her walk. There's another device that she really enjoyed, which was a stabilization device that you stand on. They're called core isolators, but perhaps another podcast we can talk about those.
Fair enough. Tell me, what lessons did you learn from rugby or from sport that you took into business when you launched Pellers?
One of the things was there's no one solution for everyone. If you want to get fit, it takes multiple different disciplines. It's not just do one exercise. It's a whole collection of different exercise modalities make it up, and variety is the key. That's definitely one of the learnings that I had.
The one thing I've learned from business and sport, and even though I resisted it when I was younger and I was playing sport, but it's something as a coach now, that's something that I bang home, and to some of my former players listening to this, they will know what I'm going to say, but preparation is everything. You know, preparation, whether it be your training, and preparation requires discipline, but preparation is really the key to everything, and I found that never to be truer than in business as well. I mean, you prepare the night before a game, you prepare for you don't just, not like in the old days in the 70s and the 80s where you prepare the night before a game, you're preparing for the whole week for that game.
Yeah, that's right.
And then when that's over, you're preparing through your recovery and then through your applying the lessons you learned for the next week, and you're applying for that whole week for the next game as well.
Yep.
So the same thing in business is that you're preparing for every day. You're preparing to meet your goals. You're preparing for your strategies, and that's something you found that from sport taught you in through the business.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, as they say, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. That was very good.
You got the good sayings.
Not in preparation. There's a couple other things. You really got to have systems in place. If you have the right systems, I can't remember which coach, but the coach used to say attitude, and coaches bring the game plan, players bring the attitude.
Right.
And that was the system that they had. And sometimes a bad game plan can be overcome with a great attitude. A bad attitude it doesn't matter if you've got the best game plan in the world, then don't even bother turning up.
Just like work ethic can overcome lack of skill at times.
Absolutely. And so, attitude is a key. A lot of it is about teamwork. It doesn't matter who gets the results. Just what are you focusing on? There's some kind of key things. You focus on winning, you're really probably going to lose. If you focus at playing well, then if you win or lose, kind of irrelevant.
I think
winning will take care of itself.
Ange Postecoglou had a great theory when he coached the Brisbane Roar, now coaching over in Japan, and coached the Socceroos. He said you can focus on results as much as you want, but if you focus on the preparation, the execution, and the performance, then those three, if you focus on those three, the results will come. But as we said, I mean, you can think of every cliche under the sun when it comes to sport and also to business, but at the end of the day, it's about the execution, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so much that goes into that.
Mepi Faoagali, professional rugby player, track coach, and businessman. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
If you would like to know more about Mepi's one-on-one performance coaching, you can find him on Facebook under Mepi Faoagali Coaching. Or if you want to know about Mepi's revolutionary training aid and system, Pellers, simply go to pellers.com.au. That's Pellers, PELLERES.com.au. And if you use the promo code ALLMATE, you can save 10% off your next purchase. A great saving. Thanks for listening to After the Game. Stay tuned to our channel for more After the Game podcast. Bye for now.